Out of the Ordinary Insights, brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
Joining me in the Captains of Industry hot seat this week is Seyi Bickersteth, the head of KPMG Nigeria. Seyi, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Let's start with Nigeria, this
Yes.
big opportunity, 160 million people.
Yes.
It is obviously the high growth area of the African continent. Do you believe it is the most exciting opportunity categorically?
I think so. I believe that, I really honestly believe that we have 160 million people. We have a rising, middle class. We have an informal sector that has not been integrated with the formal sector. And when we do that, I think it's even going to be a much more attractive country. Apart from that, you have all kinds of opportunities in various sectors. We have needs in infrastructure. We're just doing a privatization of our power sector in which we're privatizing both the generating company and the distribution company. We're getting governments, much smaller in our daily lives. At the same time, we're trying to diversify the economy, and we have a base from oil and gas. I think the most important thing for us to do is to make that transformation. With good governance, we can make that transformation, and if we make that transformation, I think we have a really
You mean
big
diversify the Nigerian economy away from oil and gas?
Diversify the Nigerian economy away from oil and gas. Sometimes I'm tempted to say, let's neuter oil and gas completely. Let's have a situation where we don't rely on that anymore. Because if we neuter that particular revenue source, I think you just see this country just keep galloping.
What is the biggest barrier to doing business in Nigeria? Because obviously we hear all the war stories across the African continent.
I think the biggest barrier is really honestly picking the right people to partner with. The guy at MTN, for instance, who's responsible for their strategy, was saying that one of the good things that they did in Nigeria was pick the right local partners. I think you need to say to yourself, what do I want in terms of my strategy, and what do the local partners that I'm going to take, what do they bring to the table? To me, that's a very critical issue, because if you get past that issue, you get past the other issues about corruption, and those kind of things that people talk about in Nigeria.
Seyi, what are the checks and balances that you need to run around those local partners?
Mm-hmm.
How do you find out whether you're partnering with people that actually are above board?
Well, that's why people like us are there. That's why you have KPMG in there. That's why you have some of the big fours in there. Because we've been doing business in Nigeria for quite some time. We know what some of these partners bring to the table. We can match what you want together with what the partners put on the table. So don't go in there and say to yourself that look, I'm a big boy, I can determine who I want to do business with. Talk to us. Because if you talk to people like us, if you talk to your bankers, if you talk to your lawyers, we can help you to make those kind of decisions.
One thing that surprises me is why the retail opportunity isn't bigger yet. If you look at that 160 million in terms of population,
Mm-hmm.
you've only got 4 malls in
Mm-hmm.
Lagos.
Mm-hmm.
Why has that industry not taken off?
Well, it's evolving now. Let me correct an impression. It's not that the retail business is not there. It's there. It's in
the second tier market.
It's in the second tier market. It's in the informal sector, and I can tell you something. Some of the richest people in Nigeria, are people who are in the informal sectors. Especially women, who are in informal sectors. One of the richest person, for instance, is a woman that sells cosmetics, in a local market, called Ereko in Lagos, who's made an enormous amount of money. But if you ask people, for instance, who've put money in malls, like Actis, for instance, they're telling you, that the realization, the returns on their investments, is extraordinary. I was talking to one of my clients, that you interviewed, PZ, and that's what they've told me. They've told me, look, listen, about 5 years ago, all our channels, were through these informal sectors, through these informal sectors. Now we're finding out, that all our channels, are coming up in malls. And I asked the guy, I said, what's the secret? And he said, look, well, people are saying to themselves, why do I need to go to this particular place, where it's rough to get into, where you have to haggle, whereas I can go into a place, where it's clean, the prices are determined, I don't need to haggle, I determine what I want to pick it up. So all I'm saying basically is that, look, those channels are changing, and you find out as you go along, that's where it's going to be.
Do you think that the malls are then a big opportunity if the mentality is starting to change from doing business in the second tier or informal markets?
Absolutely. And I've got a client, that proves that. We work for artists, who's invested in malls, a big mall in Lagos. They have another mall in Lagos too, now also called Atikeja. They are planning on opening malls in Kano. They have one, in Enugu. I have a client, that's called Persianas. He's a local guy who bought out Actis. Actis was an investor in his mall business, PAM, and he's bought them out, and he's doing something else, himself. So I can tell you from practical experience, from what I see on ground, that yes, it is.
Now, distribution must be key to the Nigerian story because
Yes.
everyone's looking for that opportunity.
Yes.
The one item that perhaps all Nigerians will want to buy.
Yes.
Is it difficult for multinationals to set up distribution channels?
Absolutely not. And that's what we found out, this client, for instance, that I was talking about to you, which is PZ, Cousins, for instance, not difficult at all. Obviously, you've got to understand the market. You've got to stay in this market, for quite some time. If you take a look, for instance, at the brewery companies, Diageo, Heineken, they do that. Dangote too, in terms of distribution, they do it. Sometimes, they do it by themselves. Sometimes, it's easier and cheaper for them to outsource it. And there are several countries, there are several companies to outsource it to. I have a personal friend, who is an audit client of ours, who is into the distribution business, for Diageo. And one of the things he's thinking about doing is building a huge distribution system in Lagos because he feels that he can make an enormous amount of money in it.
Can the entrepreneurs still make it in Nigeria?
Absolutely.
The small man in the street.
Honestly, I think that in fact, Nigeria is the heaven of the small man in the street. What the small man in the street needs, and I've talked to them extensively, is this. They want government to say, to provide what government is supposed to provide. Provide me with the infrastructure, get me the road, get me the security, get me the power, and then leave everything else to me. Just get out of the way.
Consistency of policy.
Absolutely, consistency of policy, and then just get out of the way. I can do it myself. I have the energy, I have the drive, to do it myself. But that's what they're looking for. You take power, for instance, and you're saying, look,
you took the words right out of my mouth because I was going to go directly to power now.
Absolutely.
And the challenge on that front.
Yeah, and you're saying to yourself, look, I'm a baker, I'm a welder, and these are people that we're talking about, entrepreneurs. My cost of production, rises exponentially if I have to provide this myself. But if you give it to me, and if it's reliable, then I can do all kinds of things with it.
How far is the power story behind in Nigeria? Because everyone's waiting for that electrification. You can imagine manufacturers of white goods must be saying, we'll follow the electricity, but when is that going to happen?
Well, honestly, I think, we've taken a step in the right direction now. One of the things that's happened, of course, is that most of these big manufacturers, because of what's happened with the electric, have said to themselves, look, we're just not going to rely, on power that comes, from the government grid. We're going to make our own arrangements. It's either generator, or we're going to use gas, and there are people who've been providing that for them. But one of the things that we've done in recent times in Nigeria is that we've decided to privatize the power sector. It took a long time because of vested interest, but about 2 weeks ago we opened the bid. We basically selected the people who won, the generating aspect, and we also selected the people who won the disco aspect. I'm a big believer in get government small, get it out of business, and the country will run. And the financing is there. The financing is there. Those guys are going to put their money on the table.
We've been speaking to Seyi Bickersteth. He's the head of KPMG Nigeria here at the Wild Coast Sun in the Eastern Cape.